Human-centric AI, Fabio, and then we have Florian from Supertext. We'll talk about AI again. And then Warren, where are you? Oh, there. Talk about Auth.
Also AI?
Auth AI.
Well, you're just going to have to find out.
We'll find out. And afterwards we'll have some pizzas on beer for those who are here. We will record the sessions and will be published on YouTube and also live streamed. If you want to get a notification for talks in the future, you can scan it and follow us. And next Tech Talk is already announced. It will be on the 4th of September. I guess we are still looking for some speakers. How many slots are available? 2 are available. 1 is already set. It's about AI? No, I don't know. Okay. And if you join our Tech Talk group on Meetup, you also get notifications when we announce new meetups. So, and if you want to follow me, then that's the link. That's it from my side. Then I will hand over to Fabio.
So, hello. Today I'm going to tell you a little story about me and my company, PeakPrivacy and freihandlabor, and our journey to human-centric AI. So, our journey from finding solutions with AI to empowerment of our clients. So, PeakPrivacy is a product from the freihandlabor. The freihandlabor is we are a software development company that I founded in 2009. We are now 16 people, and since approximately 15 years, we are like between 10 and 20 people. We build web applications, so we are a software development company mostly. We also do some UX, and we are really specialized of being like the tech partner for startups. So people with some money and an idea, we help them to develop their web applications and ideas. And because of this, we also had the chance to be obviously early involved in machine learning and LLMs and AI, so we could realize obviously for these startups early on solutions with machine learning and AI. And we figured out some stuff on this journey while developing solutions for our clients. So first of the journey was like we were sitting together with CTOs and CEOs and we're thinking, hey, how could AI help you to be more effective? Usually maybe to make a chatbot, maybe to make an assistant, to just automate a process. And we figured out that it mostly doesn't work. I mean, who had a positive experience with a chatbot online? Honestly, nobody. It doesn't work, and there's a reason for it. That it doesn't work. And when we figured this out, we were thinking, okay, what can we do? And this is the journey on answering this question. So First I show you something we did like quite early on with AI. This is an example we did for a client from us. They are in philanthropy, getting money from grant makers, from foundations and stuff. It takes a lot of text there. They are really not digitized, the whole industry there or the whole sector. And so with AI we could realize some assistance, like to make, for example, that you can upload your PDF and it creates a portrait about your NGO, or that it writes like a grant request to a grant making company, because this is something that a lot of people are using. And so, for example, we have this cover letter generator. Basically, it's like a cover letter when you apply for a job. It's very similar, but for grant-making organizations. And I really hope this is working. Ah, yes. So this is something we realized here. Super cool. We were sitting together with like 20 grant makers and NGOs. I was thinking, hey, what do you need in a cover letter? What makes a good cover letter? Which data you need to extract to generate such a cover letter? And also we then tested, and it was a process that took a lot of times. And then we tested, hey, is this something when you receive such a cover letter, would you give them money or not? Do you have the right information in it? And we iterated and developed it. And we had something that worked quite well. But nobody really wanted to use it, because it was writing like okay, but not how you write. I mean, it was like nothing to complain about it, but you needed to change something, you needed to adapt it, maybe this little thing here. So you always needed to change it anyway. And a fact that maybe you don't hear often is that almost every AI startup you find on the internet, or every agent, in the end it's a system prompt, so a big prompt, and data that you combine. And this cover letter generator you saw before is exactly this. So it's a huge system prompt to generate this cover letter out from the data. And what is a system prompt? It's a text file. It's a text file that can be maybe a couple of A4 pages or less. And in this text file, you basically give the AI an idea how to behave and not. And then we build a nice user interface around it. And maybe you can put another AI at the end that maybe does a double check or does something here or there, but mostly it's really a system prompt and some data. And also during this process that we then did for many clients, we figured out it's really easier to show somebody who knows what they are doing in the business at the front, how to use AI, how to write this prompt, than these people showing AI engineers or prompters on what the business is. So it's much easier to show them how to use AI also for this prompt. I mean, the biggest work was going back with all these foundations, with the expert knowledge. How do you structure it? What needs to be in it? From the technical side, it was quite easy. It was really easy in the end. And also, this is something Y Combinator also found out recently. It's quite interesting. Y Combinator, I think all of you know it. It's the biggest tech accelerator in the US, and they were always talking about, hey, how this fully automated AI agents will replace humanity, and you need to build this vertically integrated AI agents that are fully autonomous, and this is the way to go for the future. And I was always thinking, hey, what do I do wrong? Why doesn't it work with me and my clients? And I needed to change the whole presentation today because I saw this video on YouTube today, and I was thinking, okay, I need to integrate it. So basically, maybe I can put the link somewhere then. In the slides or something. So basically what they say is, hey, one size doesn't fit all. So usually when you have like this fully automated AI system that you maybe have for a lot of clients. In the end, you figure out, hey, it doesn't work for every client. Everybody has a little bit of has a different ideas, needs different stuff in the end, and every customer has maybe a little bit of a difference. And in the end, this AI is prompting, so you need to change the prompt for every customer. And also, and then obviously because it needs to be different for every customer, there's also pitfall that you become a consulting company. Or that's for Y Combinator, obviously that's a pitfall because you cannot scale without interacting with humans, like what the big tech companies usually want. So you want something, you don't need to interact with humans, but you can just buy new servers and make more money. So this maintaining and creating of these unique and complex prompts is time-consuming, expensive, difficult to scale if you think of it as a startup. And also the maintenance is a nightmare. So you update the prompt here, there, maybe you have a new LLM here or there. Then you need to change all the prompts, test all the prompts for every single client. And then also you turn it a little bit into a consulting company because you need to talk with every client. You need to figure out, hey, what are you doing? And basically, they also have this goal then, what they talk, I'm still talking what they talk in the video, so please watch it. It's like you need to build a solution that is flexible enough, and but still you don't turn into a consulting company. And also they talk about this future vision, the role of tooling around this problem, that you really need to manage this for many companies, also these prompts for many companies, and that like in a dream world, the AI, these agent networks, these fully autonomous agents or AI solutions, they are finding out, hey, what is specific about the client. They're searching through their data and finding the right prompts, the right specific things, and it's also what Microsoft with Copilot and is trying this stuff, but at the moment it doesn't work. So the tooling is really a key opportunity, and they call it future vision, I think for a reason. And they say, hey, it's really an interesting world and something that the world is only just beginning to explore. Here's a sentence for Y Combinator. And I'm super proud to say, no, we are working on this since 1.5 years, because what it means is the solution is not in technology, but in empowerment. So you need to show your employees, you need to show the people how they can build their own AI agents, AI solutions, so they can get to the target. And I really believe this is the goal. It's not only in technology. Obviously, you need a platform, you need tooling, you need support, but in the end, people need to learn how to use AI, how to build their own agents that then produce the results what they need. Also, it helps you to build your own tools, and you don't need like 28 different AI tools to create a LinkedIn post, a new blog entry, to rewrite something, or to automate ladders, because in the end it's a system prompt and data. So it's not so hard to build it on your own to a certain amount, to like 80%, like a typical Pareto here. You get to 80%, and then when you found something like that is really a quick win, really works, then you can automate it. Then you can ask yourself the question, hey, how can we go into this into automation? But how does it now look? What was our journey? So we started with PeakPrivacy as an OpenAI clone. So we started in 23. We released this OpenAI. Basically, it was a clone of OpenAI that we hosted on Swiss server at 9, obviously, and were running it there. But then we figured out, hey, we need more. It's not what our client helps. It's not like really the LLMs or the AI that really brings the benefit to the clients, and also not some individual tools. So we built the PeakPrivacy chat platform on top of it. And this is really important. It's not only a platform, it's a consultancy company that we now needed to combine. So we needed to make this move from a tech only with some consultancy startup to say, hey, no, we need to teach our clients on how to use it, how to really integrate it into their company. We need to teach the people at the front. So somebody working at the Swiss SME that is working at the front desk, that is working in support, we teach them how to use AI, how to build their own agents, because in the end they know best what the questions are that people are asking through email or through chat. And sometimes you can solve 90% of all the questions with maybe 20 answers, 20 questions. And a lot of projects get stuck when you try to automate everything in a loop. And so we developed an ambassador program in touch with it, and also onboarding workshops. And it's really a lot in empowerment that we work on. We work on Git integration for the prompts. We work on testing the prompts, making it easier for really the people. And the shift went really away from trying to solve everything fully automated with AI. Yeah, basically that's it, and happy to answer any question about this or the journey if you want to know more.
One question.
Yeah.
Like, how does it go with the learning process? You mentioned that you transition into consulting company, and how do you judge this situation? Like, people are more open right now, or it is still hard, or how is it going?
It's actually it's really surprising. So we say, hey, you need 3 hours. You need to bring your employees in, like for three hours. There can be people that never use ChatGPT, that are super skeptical, and of any age. And what I find is, as soon as you are not talking on a meta level, on a strategy level, but really go into the depths and show them, hey, look, it's a prompt, and it's some data, and then it generates this, and this is how you can do it. You bring any skeptic and also any enthusiast a little bit more down to earth, because in the end, it's really what it is. The rest is marketing. Yeah. And I mean also these agentic networks everybody talks about. In the end, it's loops. It's looping through prompts. That's it. Clever prompts, yes, but prompts. Yeah. Yeah. And as soon as people get this, usually the skepticism also goes away, because you see, hey, it's not producing results right away. We are not there yet that you can fire people. Yeah. Yeah, please.
You said that you were sort of building a Swiss version of OpenAI around the time that ChatGPT was released, and by that you meant you had your own models and you hosted them, or what do you mean by that?
No, I didn't talk about this at all. So what we do is like we evaluate the best open source models, and we run it, and we figure out how to run them on our own servers, and that we can make sure nothing is locked or safe. But and then every quarter we replace the model. So really, what encouraged us to start with this was Mistral. As soon as Mistral released their first open source model, we said, hey, that's an opportunity, let's go for it. And we need it, and then we found others that also needed it. That was a little bit the starter now. our main model is DeepSeek and Gamma.
And you use them out of the box, or you fine tune them for the specific use cases?
No, it's all out of the box. Fine tuning, you do you get much better results with prompts that you can change regularly. That you can really go into details. Fine tuning, you really only need it for edge cases here or there. But usually we don't do it. We have one thing that we do, and I think that's really the Swiss AI innovation of the year. I think it's what is normal code. We replaced the sharp S with a double S.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, I'm Florian, and today I'm here to actually talk about chatbots and LLMs, large language models as well. Yeah, what else can you talk about these days? But I'll start with a small introduction. So I'm the CTO at Supertext. We are a language AI company, mostly sort of focused on translation at the moment. Yeah, and we are sort of, I mean, we are an engineering company in the sense that we, for example, also host our own AI models. We actually like fine-tune them as well. This is why my question came up. But we also employ sort of experts, like language experts in our sense. So we kind of take this approach in between because we think something very valuable comes out of that. I guess this is also one of the gists from the previous talk from Fabio. A bit about my background before I get started. Before coming to Supertext, I did research on NLP, natural language processing, essentially the field that large language models came out of. It was quite a lot smaller back then because that was the pre-language models times. There was exactly one professor at ETH that would research in NLP. Today, it's almost any professor that does AI at ETH that sort of works on NLP. So quite a different time, also for our company, which was quite accelerated with this hype. But yeah, anyways, so when Rafi from 9 approached me about this talk, I read his message and he was saying, you can essentially present anything. Can be an idea, a thought, like whatever. I mean, just something that you would like to share or discuss about. And I thought, okay, what can I talk about? And regularly, my friends, also sometimes our clients, ask us one question whenever it comes about products that work with AI. And this is the one I'm trying to answer today. Can't we just use ChatGPT to solve that? Right? It's the elephant in the room. I mean, it's a chatbot that is working very well. I also think it's useful, honestly, so I was a bit surprised there. But question is, yeah,
yeah, does it work on every use case? And yeah, so I'm trying to touch upon that today, convince you a little bit that this in certain cases might not be the case. So yeah, but before we do that, we look a bit at the basics. I mean, sorry for this, but this is just my background and I love it. So we'll have a quick look. I mean, those you all know, right? Those are the chatbots. This is the first one was ChatGPT. By now there's many options. There's Perplexity, there's Gemini, like there's, many different chatbots out there. But the one thing that is often like in the public or in the media almost used interchangeably is chatbots and LLMs. It's not the same, right? That also came up in the previous talks. Large language models are the technology that powered chatbots, right? This is the first sort of important distinction. And then let's look a bit at what these models are, okay? They are fit based on sort of finite data using sort of iterative optimization techniques. And this is important because any machine learning model like LLMs, it's essentially, in a mathematical sense, it's just a function, right? And a function, if I'm telling you now, and this is the magic about machine learning, write a function that, given a prompt, gives you back a word and then another word, another word, another word, that's a really hard problem. So the nice thing about machine learning is that you can learn these functions from data. So if you have enough data about a problem and you can formulate an objective, then you can train a model. And this is essentially where all the power and also all the sort of challenges with LLMs come from. It is trained on a lot of data, but finite data. And because, having a function like that sort of maps words to other words, it's a really tough function, and you can't just optimize it like a parabol that you learned in high school about. So what you'll get is a model that is not perfect, but it's working very well in practice. And it's only trained on so much data and not on more. So the example is, if you train an LLM today, you can only train it on the data that exists up until today. Tomorrow it will be outdated. There are tricks to fix this, but it's important for understanding that it's always trained on finite data. And how does this training look? I can go a bit faster here. So as I said, the models, they have only one objective, which is predicting the next word. Okay, so you give it some text, you ask the model what's the next word. That looks like this. For example, here, Iceland's prime minister has sought to reassure the nation as it braces for a volcanic. This is the input into the model, and the model gives you back, if it's a good model, eruption. That's just sort of the next token prediction. And this training step, like you can do that with a lot of text, right? You can imagine you take all the text in the internet, and this is literally what's happening. And these models are trained by big research labs, for example, OpenAI, Google, but also universities. Like, for example, there's a Swiss AI initiative here in Switzerland. They sort of train their own base models. But this is expensive. This sort of one training run of sort of creating the next sort of GPT-03, the next Gemini 2.5 Pro, that costs millions. So only big companies can do that. But some of them, as was mentioned before, they open source their models, which is really nice. Sort of, for example, Mistral or Meta. And then you can add a step on top, which is sort of fine tuning. And for chatbots, it's actually called instructions tuning or instruction tuning, where instead of, the model essentially optimizing to just give you the next word, you show it a couple of examples from sort of helpful conversations. Okay, so the user asks a question, for example, can you give me an example of a fruit? And the pure base model would maybe give you back apple. Okay, but this is not a helpful answer in practice. because you're looking for a bit more, right? You're looking for a bit more context. So what it will give you in a helpful conversation is an example of fruit is an apple. It comes in various colors, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this is sort of how you get the model to be helpful. All the knowledge is encoded in the first step. Second step is you get it to have a conversation with you. Yeah, I said that this is pre-training and fine-tuning. And the one thing, and this is the last sort of basic here, is hallucinations. Hallucinations are essentially errors that LLMs make. And they happen when they sort of generate factually incorrect, misleading, or nonsensical text. And tricky part is this text often seems plausible. So we have like an example here. This is an old ChatGPT version. This is actually from Wikipedia, but it illustrates the point pretty well. So the user asks, summarize this article, gives like a URL, but the LLM doesn't have sort of access to the internet nor to the article itself, and it gives you a summary of a non-existing article. And that happens because these models sometimes pick up cues from the training data. So in the training data, there was probably sort of, definitely there were some New York Times articles, right? And there was the URL at some point and also the article text. And, you know, based on certain keywords here, it probably like learned to, I don't know, see this, sorry. Okay, so based on that, it just picks up on some cue in that in that URL and just generates a summary, but it's just made up. And that can happen because these models, I mean, it hasn't seen this exact article in the training data. How could it be? Maybe it's newer or something. And then again, it's trained on finite data, and again, it's not a perfect model. It can make mistakes. And this is important. Those hallucinations, they don't happen a lot, but if they happen, you would want to catch them, at least if it's an important use case. So, interfaces to LLMs. I think this is this is the most important part that I'd like to cover here today. Because, I mean, the decision of whether you fine-tune a model, whether you host your own model, or just take sort of the API from OpenAI or from Google, all this depends a lot on your use case, a lot on how you kind of want to sell this, right? I mean, we do also host with 9, I guess, otherwise we wouldn't be here. So we have our own models, but it really depends on the use case, right? But what I think is the interesting part, especially if we talk about this question that I'd like to come back now, is the interfaces. Because I think, I mean, my answer to this is, it depends, but if it's a target, you could probably somehow solve it with ChatGPT or any other chatbot, but it's likely not efficient. And what do I mean by that? So for me, targeted use cases are, as I said, I will touch on translation here because this is just what we do, but also programming. I think they are characterized sort of by very specific user needs and sort of that you might require feedback, or you need some sort of feedback loop from experts. And what do I mean by that? So what you see here is essentially on the left side the ChatGPT interface, on the right side Supertext interface, but you could also imagine DeepL or Google Translate or whatnot, right? And at the sort of like translation is a use case with a certain specific need. For example, you kind of want to translate from one language into the other. And you could obviously specify that in a prompt. You could say, okay, you are a professional translator, please translate the following sentences from English to German. Okay. I mean, if you had to type that every time, that would be very time consuming. And now you could say, okay, you are a professional translator, you can place that in the system prompt, in the meta prompt, that's fine. You don't have to repeat that. But then again, you always want to translate from one language to the other. Then is the question, how do you encode that? You show that as a language, sort of as a language tag to the model, or do you always have to type English, German? You don't know which languages are supported well and all that. And this is one example where you can sort of optimize your interface for the use case. By the way, it's the same with programming, right? Even if you have like if you want to have an agentic workflow while sort of developing your product, maybe your new startup, then you don't want to ask your questions in ChatGPT, because you don't, the point isn't, I mean, you'll get back some code, yes, but the point is you want the agents to work on your laptop, right? You want them to create files, create environments and all that. So it's just not a good interface. And the second point is, let's imagine this use case. It's a bit of a bigger translation, and I copied that yesterday from the UBS blog, right? So maybe in marketing you figure out, okay, I have most of my text translated, but last minute I need to translate like a paragraph from, that's just missing, and we want to publish this article in many languages, so now I need to get it translated. Of course, you will get some translation back, but if you're sort of publishing that on a website with great visibility, and I would argue that the UBS blog has that, because it's, I mean, in the US, in the UK, you can find like UBS essentially everywhere. You kind of want to make sure that the text is correct. And for example, with us, you get the chance to verify your translation, to get a language expert to check essentially what the model does in sort of cases in which this is important. And I think this is, you don't have that with ChatGPT, right? You can't collaborate with experts on ChatGPT. And I think depending on the use case, that is very important. So I think that's another argument for essentially creating your own interface and your own product around this. And I see, I don't know, how am I doing on time? Good, okay. Then we can also do this how to use LLMs part here. And I agree with Fabio there. It's very, very important to using LLMs right. So you have to educate users about the utility and also the pitfalls sort of LLMs. One thing is their predictions are often correct and useful, but you kind of need to post-edit them or verify them. So, I mean, if it gives you like something like an output back, that, for example, the model, you weren't connected to the internet and you had like your model hosted on your server, and it gives you a summary of an article that is only online, you should be very suspicious, right? It just generated something. And this is why experts need to be in the loop, and depending, like, for example, when we sort of help organizations roll out machine translation, which is essentially professional translators translating with AI, we always provide trainings. This is super important because people might just rewrite every sentence from scratch, which doesn't make sense, right? Because often the translations are correct. But then again, they can't just, hit enter and enter and enter and just accept every translation just like that. That just doesn't work. You should always, if possible, in your interfaces provide options to override by experts. Maybe that expert is already in front of the screen. We have that a lot with coding, right? Where you as the professional sort of see what the model generated, which code, and you might want to tap complete it if it sort of makes sense, or maybe it doesn't. With agents, it gets a bit more dangerous because people, even people without coding experience can sort of, prompt to get like code for an app and deploy it automatically. I think they will see the software quality sort of degrading a little bit, but I guess we'll see. And then last but not least, you should leverage the strength of the technology. And this is around context. Because the good thing about these models is they can take in a lot of context, meaning you can, in translation, for example, if you provided the whole text, it can translate all of it at once. And this is helpful because that might mean that terms are, for example, translated consistently for a whole translation, which is super important because we compared ourselves with DeepL, and we figured out, I mean, we use LLMs now for a while for our translation model, and if you sort of paste something to DeepL, what happens is you have this whole text, and then you see that certain terms are like translated inconsistently, while if you provide like the whole text, for us, you sort of see that the terms are consistently translated, and this is because you give the model the whole context, but you have to realize that, right? If you copy every individual segment or every individual paragraph, then it won't work. You need to you need to give the model the chance to have all the context and give you the best translation in our case. And this is sort of how we beat DeepL in sort of 3 out of 4 language pairs. Yeah, but this is, I mean, this is all. I guess they don't use like LLMs in their main interface yet, because otherwise I would have thought they score better there. But it was an anonymous A/B test, so we didn't do any cheating there. Yeah. Okay. So I think we are at the end. Also of my time, anyways. I think my most important takeaways, or the most important takeaways of the talk should be, I think, different interfaces than chatbots and sort of different products that are powered by AI do make a lot of sense if you've understood the use case and if you're building it for a specific use case. And I think that's this is something that you can always say if you're pitching your product or your new project or whatnot to like a client or even just to your friends. I mean, you have to see if it's less work for the user in this specific use case than, for example, ChatGPT, and then I think, it has a very good chance of succeeding. Thank you. Okay. Do we have questions?
I have a question. Did you work with Watson API, and we've maybe heard about it, or something like, do you have experience?
No, we don't work with it. I assume it's from IBM, but I don't know it. Yeah.
What's your impression of the future? Like, because every time a model comes out, stuff that before was hard to get right gets easier to get right. Is that just continuing, or do you see the point where it stops?
I think it's continuing up to a point. So I mean, my point earlier was like these. I don't think it will change how these models are trained. So let's pick an arbitrary sort of quality metric. If we're now at 90%, I think we will go to 95 to 99% eventually. But I don't think we're getting to 100% anytime soon, because these models are just the way they are trained, just the way they are optimized, they will be imperfect. And the question is, how bad is the error? How bad are the cases, the 1% where it fails, right? If you're building a classification model for brain cancer, you probably want to get it right? You don't want a model failure in the one case where it would have been important to intervene.
How about security? So, for example, if I translate something using ChatGPT, I'm always concerned what happens with my data. Where is it actually going to? How about your website? If I, for example, translate my resume, what happens with that?
Yeah, if you use our free version, I'm pleading the fifth. No. So I mean, if we delete the data with if you buy one of our subscriptions, If not, we'll use it, we'll log it. We don't use it for now, but we might use it in the future for fine-tuning better models. Like the idea is that if users give feedback, negative or positive, about what they do, this is a signal to improve our models in the future.
But it's not data that what you can share with ChatGPT, and people worry about it. Actually, it's very.
And I mean, we host it. We host it here, right? We host it with 9. Like the whole model is with us, and especially if you're a corporate client, obviously we don't save any of the data. But if you just go on supertext.com and translate a little bit just for yourself, yes, that is logged. But anything else, we delete it, and we can prove that we delete it, and it actually never leaves Switzerland. So especially financial institutions, as you can imagine, work with us. So
not any policy of data saves, I don't know.
we do have a lot of policies. No, we do have that. Yeah, like we are ISO certified and all that. It's a big topic, honestly. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. How about the camera? Like if I step here, is that going to catch me? Yeah? Okay. Okay. I'll try not to move that much then.
So let's continue.
Okay, so those of you that want to sit down, please sit down. I'm going to start. Okay, so what the heck is Auth? Thank you for coming. Today I'm going to discuss everything that you wanted to know about Auth and probably some things that you didn't want to know. So you might have heard words before like OAuth, SAML, OpenID, SCIM, and if you've been especially unlucky, you may have heard things like Kerberos or JWEs, oracles, Spiffy, macaroons. But I want you to forget about all that. And that's because those are just protocols. And protocols, for the most part, there's lots of protocols out there that surround around Auth, and they just exist to assign arbitrary words to the fundamental Auth constructs. So instead, I'm going to speak about the fundamental Auth concepts instead, so that no matter what system, infrastructure, technology, or stack you're thrown into, you'll be able to quickly adapt the knowledge that I'm giving you, hopefully, into being able to work effectively within that architecture. And to do that, the primary term you're going to need to remember is token. And you'll be using tokens everywhere. Access tokens, refresh tokens, and most importantly, JSON Web Tokens. This is an example of a JSON Web Token, or JWT. It's a fundamental unit of Auth for us. No action can be performed anywhere within your system without one. Async tasks, user verification, message queue processing, and really signature validation all require this token. And it's worth mentioning that JWTs are not encrypted. A JWT can be opened, and we can see the properties inside. There's three components here. It's made up of the header or metadata, the body and payload, which contains some user information, and the signature. So let's pop it open and see what that looks like. This is a decoded JWT. We have the identity provider that generated it, the user that it represents. If you're the holder of this token, well, that means that you are effectively this user. You can impersonate this user. You are that user. It expires at some point. I've set this one to shortly expire right before this talk. And there's some data to help you verify that signature. Nearly every system out there in the world is generating and using JWTs. That means you need to figure out which tokens are valuable and relevant to you and which ones are being generated by other systems that you should ignore, or potentially a malicious attacker. And you do this by verifying the signature. These tokens are our destination, utilizing JWTs, what we want to use, where we want to go, where we want to be. Well, then how do we get here? How do we get to a JWT? And I think we need to figure out where to start. And that means, well, most journeys into Auth, I think, look something like this. This ominous ticket looms in your backlog, your prioritized column of your Kanban board that says, add a login button. Okay, so I can do that, you may think to yourself. Just like every expert engineer out there today, you pull up your favorite vibe coding assistant and you write, hey, I need to generate a login button for my application. We're using Vue.js because it's better than React. So make sure this is a single component file with everything in line. Oh, and I just heard about these new regulations regarding accessibility. What's that? I don't really know, but make sure that it follows all the compliance requirements. And after a few minutes, you're going to have about 1,000 lines of code and something that looks like this. Okay, so you'll notice that this doesn't actually really work. And I think that's really what happens with LLMs. The CSS is off. It's thrown some things in there that are completely wrong, like the legacy password prompt. I didn't ask for that. It just decided I need one anyway. And if you click through some of those things, there's like a weird thing happening with the Facebook and Google buttons. You just end up here on this black screen. So something's remiss. You'll notice it doesn't really work all the way. And once we're here, we may be stuck. Why are we doing this? What is the next step? How do I fix this? Well, we don't know how to fix stuff like this unless we know really what we want to achieve. How do Facebook and Google buttons actually work? So most importantly, when using an LLM, it's not really going to help you get over this initial gap. And really the question you want to ask is, when am I done with this ticket? When can I finally mark it as completed? So let's start with a goal instead. Identify users so that we can determine and ensure that only authorized users can access their data, and that users will prove their identity, and we'll verify that proof. Then they'll be allowed to access that associated data for that user. This is the core of authentication. And authentication is required because if we don't know who the user is, then we don't have a good way of verifying that they're not a potential malicious attacker who's attempting to compromise our systems. Now we can try to use IP addresses, VPNs, or other sorts of inefficient fingerprinting, but nothing is as effective as just requiring identification through authentication. So at this point, we know we want to validate JWT. We know that a login screen is part of it and some button that says login or sign up. But how does it all go together? How do we get from the login button to the JWT? So let's talk about an auth flow. A user wants to access some data that's stored in an API. The API says, hey, you need to be authenticated. Where's your JWT? So the user clicks on a login button and gets redirected to an identity provider where they prove themselves. From there, the JWT is returned back to the user agent or browser or other user device, and they can utilize this on every future request to authenticate to that API. And from there, the API can verify the token and then, and only then, actually return the data back to the user. Okay. So when the token is in the browser, we have to store it somewhere. We can put it in local storage, no problem. There's no issue with that. But this is only on the client side. We need to take additional steps here. So we need to send the token to the service. Token should be sent in the standardized authorization header. This is the only appropriate format that exists. The format is the header name authorization, followed by the word bearer, and then the JWT. The word bearer just tells us that it is a JWT access token and not some other kind. You can read more about why this is the word and not something else in RFC 7523. Do not send it in the URL. Do not send it in the body. Do not send it in a made-up header called XAPI key. If it's specified in the right place, then the service will receive the token and be able to use it securely. Let's take a look at some quick code on how to receive and verify the JWT. We open the token to look at where it came from. We download a public key, for instance, and then we use that to verify the signature. This is what happens on the service side. And the one thing that's really unavoidable here in this whole process is making sure that the user is who they say they are. And we do that by having the user provide some sort of credentials through the login page, through your authentication provider. So I want to provide an example of what I think is a good login screen. It needs to look something like this. Federation to support corporate identity providers and business users, social logins for commercial users, WebAuthn, passkeys, biometrics for the security conscious. And now you'll also have to support FedCM. If you don't support passkeys yet, well, I guess I'm going to be the bearer of bad news. The next great thing is already here. So that's two huge auth features that you may be behind on. This is just an example of a good login screen. Well, let's take a look at some bad ones. Things that you absolutely do not want. Here we go. Only one federated login provider. This just will not work for a huge number of potential users that you may see in your application. Not even one federated login provider, just a password-only legacy box. And it has this ridiculous checkbox, keep me logged in. To this day, I still don't know what this is supposed to do because it does anything other than keep me logged in. Security questions. Security questions were never a good idea. And at least some of the large tech companies today have realized they were a bad idea and have started to phase them out. Started. CAPTCHAs. I'm going to say they're dated and wrong. They make it harder for users to prove their identity. And with the technology we have today in 2025, I guess I'm dating this talk, automation has no problem bypassing them. So if you're in a position where you think you need to improve the security of your website against malicious attacks, then you're exactly in the position where CAPTCHAs are not going to help you. They're not going to get you the benefit that you're looking for. And that's because the more likely you need protections from your site, the more likely an attacker can create automation to circumvent it. This is the Epic Game Store. I want you to memorize these images because in a moment you're going to have to figure out exactly what next item should be selected. Now, this is the actual quality from the Epic Game Store. I mean, I blew it up, so actually it's a little bit better. Here you go. Okay, yeah, I have no idea which one of these is supposed to be. I'm guessing more than half of you probably don't either. So to avoid running into problems with generating login or accessibility or security issues during your authentication process, if you want to implement this right, you need to be using one of a few tried and true mechanisms. The first one is well, build it yourself. But pulling components, open source and frameworks that are built specifically by other people who have thought about this a little bit. The next one is pure open source solutions, where of course you have to deploy it and manage it yourself and go through the dreaded upgrade and maintenance process. And the last one is pull in a SaaS offering, which of course costs a lot. All of these at least help you hit the ground running to make sure that you're delivering the best experience possible for your users without running into the common pitfalls. So at this point, hopefully we've got a login screen, generating JWTs, and a good understanding of the overall auth flow. But I don't want to just stop there. It leaves too many questions left still to be answered. Such as, well, if the token has a limited lifetime, that means it will expire. What do we do then? What about token revocation? How do we do that? And permissions. I haven't said anything about permissions yet. And delegation. One system accessing another system's data on behalf of a user. Let's start with JWT expiration. Whatever can go wrong will, right? So while a user is in the middle of performing an operation within our site, their token is going to expire. One option is to force reload the website at that moment, making the user log in again. Now, I know this sounds ridiculous, but apparently some engineers out there, hopefully no one in this audience, believes this is the right solution. But I've seen it happen. It happened twice to me just today. No small number of occurrences. However, this is clearly the wrong approach. I think a lot of us know that. We're all frustrated when this happens. So instead, we need to really think about, in the auth flow, access token renewal. Some, but not all, auth solutions out there support the minimum of keeping users logged in without needing to perform unnecessary additional login steps. Some of you may be thinking, oh, isn't this what refresh tokens are for? No. Dismiss that thought. Refresh tokens are not for this. The keyword here is silent authentication. There must be some way for your auth service, the solution you're utilizing, the service implementation you have, to automatically refresh the token without additional user explicit interaction. And this is contingent upon the solution you're utilizing, the technology that you have at your disposal, as well as the specific solution and product that you're building. But most of them work something like this. When login completes, the auth service places a secure session cookie in the user agent along with the JWT. Then, after expiry of the access token in the browser or user agent, the device that they're utilizing, the session cookie can be sent back to the auth service to request a new access token. From there, well, you know what the next part is. You can, of course, send the JWT on every future request to your API. And just like that, this completes silent authentication. There's no explicit user interaction here, and especially there's no refresh token. But the next complexity in token management is revocation. Okay, so I'm going to say the controversial thing that revocation is almost always wrong. If you're thinking about implementing it, there's probably something fundamentally amiss about your security architecture or some of your overall security concerns. Revoking the access token doesn't make a lot of sense if we think a lot about it. See, the token represents the user's identity, and the user's identity doesn't change. If it was valid at one point, it should be valid at every point, sans the fact we put an expiry in the token. One thing I see a lot of teams get wrong is overreaching when it comes to logging the user out. We need to revoke the JWT access token at that moment, they say. But I'll tell you, maybe you don't need to do that. There isn't any security model where that actually makes sense, revoking the JWT. I challenge you to come up with one that's security focused, not based off of some arbitrary regulation that someone in your company with the guise of security engineer told you to do. You may be thinking, what if there are permissions in the token? Well, then they won't be able to use it anymore. Well, realistically, you shouldn't really need that. Now, if you simply delete the JWT and you cancel the session credential that came back from the identity provider, you're done. If you do have permissions there and they need to be changed and you're worried about someone having access to that token, well, I'm going to push this a little bit further. That's not really best practice to have the permissions there in the first place. I think this is one of the biggest problems with JWTs today. You'll find systems attempting to utilize these tokens, which are identity tokens, to determine the access that should be granted to individual users. But it never works. And the reason is because the JWT represents user identity. identity is not security. Just because we know who the user is doesn't mean we know what actions that they should be allowed to take in our APIs. To do that, we really need to introduce a new concept, authorization. Authorization is explicitly verifying that the machine client, service, or user that's calling your API actually has the permission to do so. To reiterate, the common mistake is having a JWT and having some properties in there which represent the authorization, the access control. Even if you do this, users will get blanket permissions to a number of systems and resources, because you'll notice that there is no resource list here. It's just an arbitrary list of strings. This does add some bare minimum authorization to your API. It might work in very simple cases where all your data is public, or you only have one or two kinds of user personas, or the users of your platform software application don't really interact with each other. Which means this strategy is rarely sufficient. I assume most of you have some sort of more complex software you're running. It doesn't provide granular enough control. That's because you can't specify the resources here. You only get the list of permissions. In order to support all the complexity of different permissions in the systems that we have, we need to achieve granular access control. And that means switching to a resource-based access control strategy. In a resource-based access control strategy, individual users are directly granted individual permissions to specific resources. And only with the connection of these three things do we determine that a user may be authorized to access the endpoint they're actually trying to access and complete the API request. Let's take an example to really flesh this out. A photo sharing application, one in which users can create, fetch, share photos. Should everyone be allowed to create photos in every other user's account? Well, I think all of you will say no, that doesn't make sense. Only users of the account should be able to create photos for their particular account. So you assign permissions to a set of users so they can access the relevant accounts. Users in account A should only be allowed to access photos in account A, and users in account B should only be allowed to access photos in account B. Here we have a service endpoint where I sort of wrote some code to try to do this. It allows retrieving a photo. It requires a caller to have the photos get permission on specifically the photos resource for that specific photo in the relevant account. With granular and resource-based access control, we can scope the permissions down to only what is absolutely required and nothing more. In this case, the user doesn't need access to be able to delete, share, or edit photos, so we don't provide them those permissions. This is known as the principle of least privilege. The more granular a solution we have for authorization, the more secure it is. This should be self-evident. Users that have access to everything can do more than they likely need to. When practiced, even if a malicious attacker who manages to compromise a user's JWT can impersonate the user, they would still be blocked from performing administrative actions in the account or your overall platform for the tenant or customer level because the original user didn't have those permissions. I want to move back to something that I said earlier. I know I said refresh tokens are never for renewing access tokens, and I'm sure at least one of you disagreed. So is a refresh token, I get some nods. That's always a good sign. So is refresh token, in my opinion, ever the right answer? Well, I wish I could just say no. Yeah, so the truth is if you're attempting to use refresh tokens in your platform, software, architecture, application, 99% of the time, this is probably an incorrect usage. It does beg the question of like, what is a refresh token actually meant to be used for? So let's assume for a moment you need to integrate with a third party and your users want to delegate access to their data stored in your application to that external product or service. See, I use the word delegate there. That's how you know that a refresh token may actually be relevant for solving this problem. The photo sharing application could be one example of this. If we add in the complexity that the photo sharing app wants to store the photos in user-owned storage. Let's take Google Drive, for instance. So we got our photo sharing app and the user who's accessing it, but it wants to access the user's Google Drive. So it redirects to Google Drive, which in turn uses Google Identity Service to grant access to the photo app. To do this, it asks the user, hey, can I grant the photo app access to your Google Drive? And let's assume, for the sake of the argument, user says yes. back to the Google Identity Service. Here it will generate a refresh token and grant it to the photo app. This refresh token will be stored by the photo app so that later, when the user is not involved in this flow whatsoever, it can pass the refresh token back to the Google Identity Service, get back an access token to be used with Google Drive. This secondary flow does not include the user. It's also worth mentioning that there are 2 other applications in play here, not just the photo app. At some point, your service may expand to have this complexity, to the point where cross-product offline data sharing is required in order to work effectively. It's a product challenge, a solution that you'd have to integrate into your actual product based on what your users want. But if you don't have this need, and you're already using refresh tokens, well, then you need to take a hard look at your tools and your architecture and ask why. Are we doing the right thing? And if we're not doing the right thing, is it because that the tools we're utilizing encourages us to do it this way? Do our tools support our actual security needs? And most importantly, if you get to this level of complexity, don't be this company who requests the ability to delete all of my emails and all of my calendars. Don't request extensive permissions from your users, where a compromise of the permissions or refresh tokens results in a malicious attacker being able to perform quite dangerous actions against your users, or in my case, my data here. Also, I guess don't be this company, Google in this case, without the ability for users to select exactly what the photo app should have access to. If this is the photo sharing app, it should never be able to delete all of my data, all of my Drive documents. It doesn't make sense for that application. I never want that to be the case as a user. It should be able to create photos in my Drive and edit and change the permissions of those exact photos, even delete them, maybe. But that should be the configurable part, and not anything else. Everything else, as far as the photo app is concerned, should not exist. And Google shouldn't really give it the permission to do that. With refresh tokens and the correct usage of granular-based access control, this is easily solvable. It provides the security controls that your users want and need without leaking or providing a vulnerability that could be exploited by attackers. Okay, so when we talk about systems that are interacting with each other, the user is usually in the loop here. I was in the loop when I approved access to the photo sharing app. But if 2 offline systems want to interact with each other, and when I say offline system, I mean the user isn't present in the flow. What does that look like? Consider an example where, like, your CI/CD system, you want to deploy technology to your cloud provider. I'll use GitLab and AWS as an example. We can extend our original authentication flow into what is called OIDC OpenID Connect, which is just a clever way of saying 2 offline systems interacting with each other. So client application wants to access GitLab, for instance, wants to access our API, which is AWS. It's going to generate a public-private key pair, store the private key, and upload the public key to AWS. From here, when it wants to actually access the API, it will generate a JWT, just like our standard authentication flow, and use this to access the API provider. Every provider out there that cares about security offers OIDC. If they don't offer it, that solution is insecure. There is really no middle ground here. If you do care about security and they don't offer it, find another provider. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, I'm so glad he hasn't said anything about AI. And I know the other half of you thinking, when's he going to get to AI? So maybe the AI skeptics should just like cover their ears for a moment. I see no one covering their ears, so I don't know if that's a good sign. Okay, so let's assume we have an agent that wants to access some data and a service provider. Well, they need an access token, right? So it asks the user to log in, user logs in, proving their identity, generates some sort of JWT, which is passed back to the agent, and the agent can utilize that to access the service provider. You verify the JWT is actually valid, and then return the data back to the caller. Does this remind you of anything? Yeah, I mean, it's almost exactly the same, right? Nothing changes. It's the exact same flow with the exact same data being accessed in the exact same way. There's no special magic here to provide Auth for AI. It's not its own thing. It's nothing special. It's exactly the same systems that we've been building all along. Now, at this point, I'm sure at least one of you is thinking, do I even need to know anything about this? All I'm going to say is don't fall into the trap that some other team will build some components and handle all the security for your APIs. Maybe it's internal infrastructure. Maybe they'll magically handle all the requests that are coming in. Fundamentally, every endpoint for your services is susceptible to attack. And you're responsible for securing it. That's hopefully why I'm standing up here saying these things. Lastly, I want to talk about a few frequent misconceptions. The first one is internal services. I don't need Auth because I'm only writing an internal service. I'm sure some of you have even thought that recently. I like to say there's not such a thing as internal services, just services that don't have any external requests yet. Attacks from threat actors can still end up your API through a proxy, a gateway, or another service from another team in your company, or even from a customer. And your app is just as susceptible to those lateral attacks. One day, all your hard work may additionally pay off, everything you've been doing up to this point. And now your external customers want access to your internal services. Well, if you haven't been thinking about Auth the whole time, then potentially you have a giant vulnerability waiting there. So my recommendation is always to treat callers as external, and even if they are from another team in your company, and always assume your API is public. Okay, the next one is the complexity security trade-off. I want to flash back to the Auth flow for 1 second. Anything that's less than this is technically insecure. So SAML removes this line and often this thing. So in my opinion, SAML is a bit insecure. I also want to say that anything more than this is unnecessary. And if it's unnecessary, it's also insecure. Maybe I'll get to why in a second. For instance, requiring an additional header. For lack of a better name, I call this additional unnecessary complexity warrant security law. But if you have a better name, please let me know. Vulnerability increases as system complexity increases. So I don't think this is that far-fetched. I don't know if it's linear, polynomial, or exponential. But whatever the case, if we add in additional functionality, the complexity increases, which means there's more vulnerabilities. So adding a security feature decreases security. Yay. And I know that for those of us who enjoy working with probabilities, which I'm sure is no one, I wrote this a different way. The likelihood of vulnerability is the sum of the complexity of all the features times the likelihood of that feature causing a vulnerability, minus whatever additional security you get by adding in that additional feature in the first place. We can summarize this as, unless the new functionality significantly decreases your attack surface, additional security measures actually increase the risk of a vulnerability rather than decrease it. Okay, the last misconception, just to wrap this up, is that every OAuth provider works the same. I can assure you it does not. Most OAuth providers can't be bothered to do an obvious and simple thing, follow documentation, let alone follow a complicated specification. And Apple is no exception. The API lacks consistency, returning a different schema every time. The first time, I don't know if you can see this, but it returns, and this doesn't reflect off here, name and email address. That sounds great, but randomly on follow-up requests for user authentication, you'll just get nothing. That's right. If you're using Apple, good luck. Next one, Microsoft Azure. Or is it Azure AD? Enter ID? I don't know. Whatever they decided to name themselves during this particular moon cycle. They can't figure out how to follow the spec either. Most providers will put the user ID in some obvious property in the JWT. Microsoft said, you know what? We've got a genius idea. Let's create a new property called OID and stick it in there instead. And in the user ID property, we're just going to stick a random string. Genius. Okay, and that's just two of the providers with issues. But if I had more time, I'd go into literally every single one of them has decided to mangle the spec in some way, and in a confusing and dangerous way for implementers. And I'm definitely stopping here because I don't have time to go through each and every one of these things and prevent you from having pizza and beer, but I don't know exactly when that's going to be, so I'm just going to stop here. When it comes to Auth, there's quite a number of additional things that I could have mentioned. So many, in fact, that's it. I am definitely done. But I should probably quickly introduce myself because I haven't done that yet. I'm Warren, and I'm the CTO at Authress, which provides login and access control for the applications that you write. This means user management, granular real role and resource-based access control, API keys for your technical users to interact with your APIs, and supports securing service-to-service communication along with M2M tokens. So if you don't want to build any of those pieces yourself, I guess I may know something about that. Hopefully at this point you know how to improve your APIs or even start not being so afraid of jumping into a process that uses the four-letter word AUTH. If you're interested in the transcript or the presentation, I'm sure they'll be up at some point. But if you have questions that I don't have a chance to answer, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or join the community, and I'll try to get to them. Thank you. Okay. Any questions?
Complexity is a beast, right? Because when you add stuff, it's not just what you add that adds to it, but the interrelations between those. So I guess your thing is more like a square then.
So as a question on Warren security law, you know, is it linear? For sure not. And as you pointed out, realistically, it's very complicated to calculate the complexity of a solution. There's a lot of interesting research out there to actually talk about how complex is our software solution. There are a lot of companies that attempt to provide you with feedback so that you can figure out how to decrease the complexity of your solution. Some strategies are like the amount of interconnectedness between individual modules, for instance. And yeah, all these things, if anything, just make this explode, right? It's not just exponential. There's a multi-dimensional input parameters into this function. So yeah, for sure.
A very minor detail. You mentioned that as your JWT token is about to expire or has expired, you will go and renew it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you do that before it expires? And if so, how much before?
Yeah, so we have to remember that the users can complete control of their browser. So the question is when should we renew an access token, a JWT? With modern technology, the best answer is, yeah, renew it as often as you want. Our own SDKs renew it about 2/3 of the lifetime through the token before it expires. However, because the user can be offline between their interactions with your API, you always have to assume that there's a scenario where the token's been expired and deal with that. And if their auth session credential is still valid, it should be able to perform silent authentication without the user performing any action. We call this stopping the world. Basically, as requests are coming in, you block them, complete the silent authentication, and then continue the API request in that moment. It's fairly complicated to get right, but utilizing the right provider, they may have some SDKs to help you with that. So yes, in an ideal world, you can keep refreshing the token, but you shouldn't refresh it if the user doesn't need it. And apps that do that actually create additional waste, energy waste, etc. So really, you think about how your app is being used. Maybe you don't need to upfront do it. You can wait until it expires. You know, let's say a banking app, which a user uses for maybe 5 minutes and then doesn't use it again for 2 months, right? It doesn't make sense to keep refreshing it. You wait till it expires and then you deal with it at that point. Anyone else? Go ahead again.
There's been, I haven't really looked into it much, but Apple started with this thing that you use Face ID to log in. Is that fundamentally different than what happened before somehow? Was it here already? Is that the private key thing, or what? That's like passwordless now. It's like SSH somehow.
Yeah. So that falls under, the Face ID falls under biometrics, which is the same as a YubiKey, or one of the other devices produced by a lesser known identity, Titan Keys, by the Chinese subsidiary that Google was using. There's no different from that. So passkeys, Face ID, biometrics, they all work the same. They perform the verification on device, and they have an internal private key, which is signing requests. And you register the public key on the other side with your application. So users are sending you a public key that is actually a request. It's sort of like a JWT, but it's signed with their private key. It's fairly complicated. It's known as FIDO2 is the protocol, or WebAuthn in the browser. I don't definitely have the time to go through.
But it's like this OIDC thing. It's almost the same in that sense, that it's a private key that I hold.
OIDC is, I mean, yeah, in a way, all the security strategies are very similar. The most secure one is you have a private key stored in a black box and a public key that you share with the world. It's the way that GPG, simple signing, has always decided to try to push and never really got out there. The biometric stores a private key on your device, and your fingerprint or iris just allows the black box to private key to be utilized. So it's a multi-step verification. Same thing goes with the YubiKeys or TPMs on your motherboards to verify the signature of your operating system. So it has been around for a while, but there really hasn't been a standard up until about 5 years ago. And then that's still been iterated on. What Apple was doing before that, who knows? It probably wasn't even that secure, because the technology, the hardware didn't exist to actually make it secure. And without the hardware sitting on your device, well, we're sort of in a problem space, because if there's just software, that can be compromised. So yeah, it was probably doing some sort of public key, private key thing, like OIDC. The flow is a little bit different. For instance, OIDC requires having a public web page somewhere where you can have JWKs listed. So the public key is actually publicly fetchable, because the systems are different. But with the passkeys flow, you actually send the public key as the user to the provider, and then you give it to them. It's not publicly available. You can't, like, I've got one of these in my pocket. You can't ask me. Like, this is the public key for here is not like publicly available on the internet. So it's a little bit of a different flow. Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.